We can get started now. Thank you everybody for being here. Great lunch. My name is Harrison Sullivan. I'm the current director and the fund for Atland now. I'm very excited to be attempting to moderate this panel with these amazing people. I am definitely no Savannah, so my apologies if this is not as smooth as the first one went. But just for a really quick introduction, today we have Carly Uhlig, who is a current analyst at New Capital. Ben Stevenson, who is a current analyst at Beta. Emily Kist, venture and innovation associate on that. So before we get into it, I think it was maybe introduction to talk about where you went to school, kind of what type of how you were involved with kind of the venture capital and entrepreneurship ecosystem at that school, and then maybe we do like I think in the last session we ran through like a podcast or a book that you kind of recommend.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Carly. I'm a Minnesota. I studied marketing and a minor in data analytics. And the way I got started in entrepreneurship is 2020. I was living alone in my dorm room and saw a newsletter talking about the deluxe internship program. If I heard about that, I was really interested and sent in my resume and wrote a couple letters and heard back from the lovely Home Center of Entrepreneurship, and they said, unfortunately, we can't take you for the question, which is fair. But how would you like to interview for an internship? Yeah. And really didn't have any previous entrepreneurship experience. In high school, I did DECA and a newspaper, but really sunk my teeth into it with an internship and absolutely loved it. It just got me really excited, and I think that's why I learned about it. Entrepreneurship and a lot of especially CPG companies that I got. So from there, joined Atland Ventures, some other instances where I went, and joined that beginning of my sophomore year, and started as analyst and then senior director, and then finished up as internal last spring. So really love that, and now I'm an analyst at New Capital. We do inventory financing for that for major retailers, and I'm really enjoying that. It's been great. It's small fun for our start. And then hobby I like to travel. I'm going to Portland, Maine next weekend with my friend, and it's one of my favorite cities. Ooh. Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin is a modern fiction book about old friends who are video game developers. And so it is kind of starky, but it also deals a lot with love and friendship and loss and disability, being a woman.
I'm Ben. I also went to the University of Minnesota, majored in marketing, and kind of throughout like late high school into early college, got really interested in entrepreneurship. I was the guy like reading all the business entrepreneurship books and things like that, and watching YouTube videos. I got really into it, and then I heard about Atland and thought, wow, that seems really cool. And I didn't know really anything about venture capital. I think a lot of people have gotten a sense that, right? But it seemed like it was really sharp people, and I said, yeah, like let's try to do that. And so I applied and got in really in my junior year, and then met a bunch of people through that, became a director and really learned a lot through that. Great experience. So that was cool. That's kind of how I got in. And favorite Twitter podcast, recently I've been listening to the My First Million podcast, which is like these two startup founders who run a bunch of successful businesses, and then they basically break down like different business ideas on every podcast. So it's really interesting to get a bunch of different data points of like successful businesses that people are currently running. And there's a bunch that you'd never even think about or ever heard about.
Hi guys, my name is Emily. I'm actually originally from South Dakota, and then I graduated from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, so spent 4 years in Lincoln. And I initially started as an accounting major and did an accounting internship at a large construction company, and I was like, don't know if I loved it. And I saw an internship posting for our local angel group called the Nebraska Angels, and similar to what you said, hadn't heard of startups or venture capital before, didn't know what an angel was, but I had this weird gut feeling that of like, I just had to do this. So eventually got the internship, kind of catapulted into the startup ecosystem in Nebraska, got super involved. And then during my time in college, I started the Husker Venture Fund. So very similar to Atland, student led. We invest $25,000 into early stage Nebraska based startups. So yeah, I did that my senior year of school. And then now I am a venture and innovation associate at Nelnet. Has anyone ever heard of Nelnet before? How have you heard of Nelnet?
I have students.
Yeah. So, we are one of the largest, I also have my student loans in Nelnet, but we're a federal student loan servicing company. We've been doing that for 20 years, but we've diversified into a lot of different areas. So we have renewable energy, we have payment processing, we have a bank, we have a fiber internet company, 8,000 employees, but I sit on the venture capital and angel investment team. And then I also spend some time working on internal innovation. So yeah, I graduated in 2022, and now I actually live here in St. Paul. So I work remotely, we're headquartered in. Yeah.
I'm gonna go right back to you.
Yeah.
Starting a venture fund sounds insane and like a ton of work. So I'm curious to hear kind of what inspired you to do that. And what was that process like?
Yeah, I, at the time when I had joined the Nebraska Angels, I looked around me and there weren't many opportunities or internships for students to really like get exposure to, you know, entrepreneurship, startups, or on the investment side. And I was also curious if there were other people my age that had this interest. And so it kind of made sense to like start a club or something. And I didn't know what that was going to look like at the time. And then I had met my co-founder who's also interested in venture capital. And so we started the fund, and the whole goal was to create education for students and become a target school for hiring too, because trying to get hired at a firm when you say you go to University of Nebraska is very difficult. So that was one of our goals. And then it also was just perfect timing because at the time in Nebraska, there's a funding gap for early stage startups. And so that $25,000 check becomes really meaningful in order for them to go get funding later on in the process. And so it felt like there were just a lot of yeses at the time, and it was just really good timing. And so we just kind of went from there, and it took off, and they're still doing really well. I think they're almost at 10 investments today. So yeah.
Wow. No, that's amazing. And I think you guys all kind of touched on already kind of what inspired you to get to venture capital, but I'd love to hear kind of inside Atland and Husker Venture Fund, what the journey kind of looked like, and then kind of how that led to what you're doing today.
I will say this, I met Ben at the info session when I was first joining Atland, and he said something that shocked me. He was like, these are the smartest people in the school, and I get to work with them. And I was not thinking that I'm one of the smartest people. And one of our so I just but really learned what I didn't know and learned what I still didn't know outside of college, and then learned what got me excited. You know, when you look at so many different industries, you can go off with just pure excitement of who you want to have a conversation with and what you want to talk about and what you want to learn more about. So from there, I really liked CPG companies and interned at Kohl's, the retailer in Milwaukee, and really found that interesting. And you know, thought it would be nice to move to Milwaukee. It's closer to my home in Chicago. Had roommates out there and everything, and a return offer, and you know, kind of wanted to do that. And then through an entrepreneur and networking, and I found a discount offer. And that was a tough decision to make. But I'm really happy with my decision. It was a bit of a risk. But I think from Atland, I learned that sometimes it's actually not a risk. And sometimes if it feels right, it's not a risk. You have to have faith in yourself and faith in that everything will work out okay.
Yeah, I obviously echo what Carly said. I think one of the themes that I've heard a lot so far already is that venture capital tends to attract a really unique group of people, which I've definitely found to be true. And I think that says something about venture capital itself, but also the types of people who will be into venture capital. And that's initially what kind of drew me into it and into Atland is it's people who are really smart, but also not just book smart and just follow all of the rules and do everything that they're told. They're people who are willing to break rules a little bit, willing to think outside the box, willing to believe things that not very many other people believe and voice those opinions, which I think is really important. Because I think a lot of times like it's easy to just fall into what everyone else believes. Everyone else is doing this, so that must be the right thing to do. But venture capital is people who are willing to say no to that and stick to what they believe. That's where you really see the biggest returns. And so I think that was really cool. As well as just there's this kind of like sense of adventure and excitement that comes through venture capital and entrepreneurship. I think that's something that's really drawn me to it over the years. And so as I graduated and then decided to go into something that wasn't venture capital, I still am always kind of keeping that thread of like, where can I build skills and develop into roles that will allow me to get back to that sense of adventure and excitement in starting a company. Investing in that. So I think there's different ways to do that. It doesn't only have to be capital, which is one of the reasons that I chose not to go into it right after college. But I think that thread is something that I.
Are there any like specific, you kind of mentioned this like skills or learnings you've taken from being in VC and Atland that you use now?
Yeah, I would say one that is really important is like structured thinking, or having a structured way of deciphering problems and coming to a solution. So like in VC, if you're going to try to evaluate a company, you can kind of start from scratch every single time and try to come up with like, oh, how is this company going to do, and sort of arrive at like, I don't know, these different piecemeal conclusions that you come to. But there are also certain frameworks that you can use that are a really helpful start to look at a company. So like one might be like the horse jockey racetrack framework, where if people haven't heard of that, like the jockey is the team. So like you evaluate how good the team is, the horse is the product. So like how good is the product, how good are they improving it? And then the racetrack is like the market, what is the market at? So that's a really helpful one to start. And I think that idea of thinking, that way of thinking, is really helpful for solving any problem and can be applied in a lot of different industries. So that's one. The other one that I would mention is the one thing that I didn't like as much about VC is sometimes I think there's a lack of like tactical skills that are really important for a startup to have. So that's something that I wanted to develop in the job that I went into, is make sure that I have those different pieces, because that's so important for any company. And if you've actually gone through and experienced that, then you have a much better way of evaluating that.
Love it. We just had a speaker come into Atland, the horse jockey guy. So good stuff. And then Emily, what about you? Did you kind of end up at Nelnet?
Yeah, it became kind of a natural path for me. So like I mentioned, I started at Nebraska Angels, and Nelnet is one of the 3 largest investors in the state of Nebraska, and we invest very heavily through Nebraska Angels deal flow. And so that relationship naturally happened over time. I became an intern at Nelnet, so I had a couple different roles and already had those relationships established with the company. And graduation came around, and I was like, oh, I need a job. And I talked to my bosses at Nelnet, and they were looking to add to the team. And so it made a lot of sense. And that's one thing that I always tell students, and where I put most of my emphasis is like, yes, classes are important, your GPA is important, but nothing is as valuable as the time you spend building relationships in school with both the campus community and then the external community. So getting involved with startups, founders, investors, and that sort of thing. And that's why I am where I am today. So
I have a follow-up to that. I feel like in venture, we always hear like the importance of having a network, and obviously as students, like we've been in the space for like 2 years, so it's kind of hard to have that. Do you guys have any advice on like how kids like us can start a network in kind of like a natural and non-transactional type of way?
I can start. I will say I don't think I'm exceptionally great at that. So like maybe you should take my advice. Take advice from people that you want to be like, or people who've gotten the results that you want. But the one thing that I will say that I've found personally valuable is find a way of meeting new people or making connections that really works for you. So like for me, I'm a little bit more of an introvert, and I would much rather have like a 2-hour-long deep discussion with someone than just like meet someone and for 5 minutes have like this crazy like discussion where you're like laughing all the time and it's like, seems like it's amazing, but it's like kind of surface level. And so I found sometimes like certain networking events can be more like that, where you don't really get a lot of with people, and those just don't work as well for me. So I like to try to target like, where can I find someone and say like, hey, you seem really interesting. We just like talk for a little while, and then you can sit down and really have a good discussion. That just works better for me, and I think because of that, you can do it more consistently, and you'll get better results.
I'll add to that, and this is something I also say to students, and you've probably heard this, but like, you have leverage as a student, and not leverage with a negative connotation, but people want to talk to students, people want to learn about what you're studying about and help you. And I always knew that as a student, but now that I've graduated, it's like even more true. Just go talk to people, say, hey, I'm a student, I want to talk to you. And I also like the way you said, like, having a non-transactional conversation, and that's so hard because that's why we all show up to networking events. So one thing I always encourage, and I've seen be successful, is just like constantly asking people, how can I be helpful to you? It might not be apparent at first, so just ask. And that's what I recommend, even as a student.
I'll give an example of a relationship I've built. One of my marketing professors in Europe heard about a brand from his TA and really loved their marketing. So he gave it as an example in class. And I was hooked on it. It's a great company and it's a startup. I want to talk to them. And I knew it didn't fit in half of pieces. I actually never even brought it up. And I wasn't looking for a job. I wasn't looking for anything. I just really wanted to hear how this 26-year-old founder started a company in 2020 by herself and set up a call. And that was like 2 years ago, and we're still in touch all the time. She's raising a fund, so I'm helping her like look over her debt because now I have experience with that from Atland. They have a tap room in Denver. I'm planning a trip out there to go actually finally meet her in person in Denver. And then I do some marketing for them. And just having a call with someone who you want to learn from and you're interested in, it doesn't have to be transactional. And it's still nice to meet people, and also then I was able to connect her to other people. I love that. And then another thing that I learned from Atland is, I can't remember who quoted this, but your EDU email address is the biggest power you have. The biggest power you will ever have. Milk it for as long as you can. Say you're a student. That's exactly.
No, it sounds like kind of the common thread here is just being curious and open and approaching it from like a learning perspective rather than like, okay, I want to get this. Honestly, that was a selfish question. I needed that advice, so thank you. I think you guys have all kind of like touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious to hear about the fun part of this. Like, what is kind of your biggest takeaway from being involved? We start.
Yeah, I would say the biggest one for me is just the realization that just because you're young or you are a student or you're inexperienced doesn't mean that you aren't in a position to make things happen. Like that, like at least for me, I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I mean, still do, of thinking like, you look at these founders and it's, you know, like some 30-year-old who's just raised $10 million and he's like, this is like the third company that they started, and you're like, wow, you're so cool, like you're way better than me. I could never do something like that. But that's really not true at all. That's just someone who took a few more chances and maybe has been alive like 2 years longer. So it's not like they're a completely different person or cut from a different cloth. You can still feel like you can go out and make things happen. You can start a venture capital firm while you're in school. You can raise millions of dollars. Like you can do all of these things. You don't have to count yourself out just because you feel like you're not there yet. You don't fit like this certain image of how a successful person should. And I think that's a good lesson that I try to keep reminding myself. Is you can always make
Inspired.
I think I learned how I like to learn the best. And part of that came from internships and also 18 years of schooling. But it really took a different level when I joined Atland and also started teaching some of the new analysts. And realized that going through a bunch of PowerPoints is a little bit tough. Just giving them the resources and walking away is a little tough. And really trying to be a personal support for them, a personal teacher rather than a lecturer. Help me be able to teach, but also how I like to learn. And that's helpful in my new job when I don't know a lot of things. I'm 21 and I'm new and it's a small company and I if I can go to them and say, I know I need to learn this, here's what I need from you in order to learn this and be good at it, that's really.
Yeah, learning how to be curious is interesting. I feel like curiosity isn't one of my top strengths. I have more of like executing type strengths. And so when I've seen, I think the best investors, in my opinion, and through my experience, are the ones who lead with curiosity and aren't afraid to ask questions and learn. And so that's something I'm still trying to exercise every day and get better at, and also not like feel ashamed or feel stupid because I don't know some like jargon from some complex SaaS company. Like it's okay to not know. And so I would just emphasize that focus on.
And kind of, let me go back to again, kind of starting the fund, what would you say it was kind of the hardest part of going about that? To convincing people that like students, like you should trust students with their money, like.
Weirdly enough, everyone was okay with it. Like, there wasn't much pushback and people were very excited. And the reason is because everyone at the university had already wanted to do something like this, but no one had the time. And you know how bureaucratic and slow that university systems can be. So that was really helpful. They were like, yeah, go for it. And we had a bunch of passionate, excited students, but that's what became the most difficult part, is pushing through the red tape and bureaucracy and you know, all the different requirements and stuff like that, and really trying to figure that out. So the most important thing was just staying diligent, still staying passionate, and just trying to move towards the goal. But yeah, like you guys, yeah,
It sounds easy.
yeah, get it done, right? Like it was a lot of work, but it was what I cared about, so I
Yeah.
enjoyed doing it. But yeah.
Then Ben and Carly, what about like, not raise a fund, but still there's challenges with being a student investor versus somebody that's been in the industry for 15 years. I mean, it's like there are things that were kind of tricky while you were part of Atland.
Communication was a challenge, and I guess I didn't know that it was a challenge, but I look, sometimes I go through my old emails about months and I see an email that I like first sent to a founder when I was in So I think that's a challenge, because no one teaches you how to, no one has ever taught me how to communicate with adults and talk about money, and talk about jobs and all this kind of stuff that like, but I also think that tells you how much power and knowledge you can give to students when you give them something to care about other than, and give them people to care about and people who rely on you.
That isn't me.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest challenges is like taking in people who are really new to venture capital and don't know a lot about the landscape. Kind of like what Carly said, like getting people to the point where they can really execute and get things done is tough, especially while you're also managing school and work or another job that often people have. All of that stuff makes it pretty difficult. And so you not only have to like get all the hard skills there, but also just like keep people inspired and encouraged to like keep working, like make people really excited about it. So they want to go out and they want to go find the next big founder and they want to go talk to them, and then pitch it to the company and like do all of that. I think is that's a really big role. That's super important. Otherwise, people kind of tend to drift away or get pulled away by all the other things that are happening.
It's definitely kind of a crazy experience going from being like a 19-year-old college student to being thrown into doing like full-time work. Definitely a shock. Something that I think Elise mentioned this on the panel before, but like we always hear about the importance of having like diversity of perspectives in venture capital. So that can be obviously like demographic things, or it can be kind of like we talked about with Atland, we pull kids from all over across the university studying different things. Why, in your opinion, do you think kind of having diversity of perspective in venture?
It seems like a lot of people think that Gen Z has the same votes the exact same way, likes the same exact things. And when you get a bunch of 28 students from 5 different colleges and different backgrounds together, you realize that's not true. And then you can kind of push back against these stereotypes. And really show how powerful Gen Z can be and that we're not just a one-way.
The way I think about it is that in venture capital, you're trying to make the optimal decision. And if you want to make the optimal decision, you have to know what all of the different factors are and what all the different options are. And I think especially when you don't know that much, so even if like you can learn as much as you want, you're never going to know everything there is to know about everything. And so what you need is you need other people who have knowledge and information and perspectives that you don't have, that they can point you to those other options of things you could be looking at, or different ways to see a problem, or different things to invest in. So like, for example, I remember within Atland, there are a number of like women's health companies that we have looked at over the years. And that's something that I don't know anything about. Like, I mean, I've just never really studied it because it's not a part of my life. And if I was running a fund just by myself, I would never look at any of those companies or be able to process whether or not it's a good investment, because it's not something I know anything about. And so you need other people to say, oh, actually, I know about this market, and this is a really good product. This is a really good opportunity. And then from that, you can have disagreeing perspectives where you say, well, actually, based on what you're saying, I disagree for X, Y, and Z reason. Then you can have that discussion. If you never have the other person to point out the other side of the argument, then you just don't even get to have the discussion. You end up missing out on a lot of opportunities.
I would just add that from the investor lens, diverse investment teams are what get diverse startups funded, excuse me. Having like a diverse team, they're gonna be the ones that advocate for founders who are women or people of color. Because you know, there's a whole different set of like soft skills and relationship building that can happen in a room when you have more people at the table with, you know, different knowledge and expertise. And that's something we even tried to focus on at UNL when starting the Mr. Venture Fund. Like at first, when we started it, we sent it to our network and it was just all college business students, the only people we really knew. And over time, we set up initiatives to recruit people from other schools, similar to how you guys have done. And it's just been so much more beneficial because now you can bring in that extra expertise as well and advocate for the founders that come in. So.
Super interesting insight. I think in the panel before, I'm also, I don't know the exact number, but something like 3% of funding is to like startups founded by people of color and women. So definitely agree with you.
Yeah,
it's fun, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's bad.
Changing gears a little bit. So obviously, like going into venture after graduation is extremely competitive and not an opportunity that as available. Do you have any ideas of like different types of careers or career paths that you think are available that are venture adjacent? So either you're kind of like could be in an entrepreneurial startup community or like good kind of feeders that eventually if you want to end up.
A lot of skills are transferable, and a lot of people go into investment banking, private equity, because they want to learn modeling and hard skills, and I know you want skills of it. But I think there's a completely different path where it's whatever is matches your energy, whatever staff pays is very similar to whatever is operational is similar to capital. And so it's really broad, and I would say just do what really interests you and excites you, but also what you want to learn. And if there's a great mixture of that, so.
Yeah, I think if you're really looking at venture capital, from what I've seen, most of the best venture capitalists are people who have also founded companies. That seems to be a pretty strong trend. And I think a big part of that is just that when you are actually in the trenches doing something, you get to see all of these different data points of like what really matters, as opposed to just reading about or studying what other people say matters. And those are two different things. Obviously, like studying and learning and like reading all these books about venture capital is very important. And I think people should do it. But I do think there's something that comes from actually being in the trenches that is really, really helpful. And so I think if you really want to get into it, I think that's a good way to go. Obviously, that being said, there are plenty of people who get into venture capital without starting, still do really well. So it's not a requirement, and not everyone is cut out for starting a company, thinks that would be enjoyable. But I do think that's a good option to go. The other one that I would maybe say is like finding a field that you're really interested in and then going really deep into that, because then you can at least specialize in that, and then you could say go into venture capital that like specifically focuses on healthcare, specifically focuses on agriculture, because now you know all about that because you've been in it a lot. I think that's a good way.
Everyone, you guys know this, but like everyone in venture has a super weird path on how they got into it in the first place. Like there are no two stories alike. And I actually have a friend recently who he studied finance and he just started his own firm doing fractional CFO work for startups. So that's a great example of how you can still kind of stay in the world. There's also like platform and operations roles at venture funds. So maybe you're less interested in the investor side, but you still really want to be involved in the community and you're really good at executing and really good at ops. So maybe that's a path for you as well. But mostly, yeah, just following your interests and staying close to the community.
I know for timing, I believe this session's supposed to be done at 2:30, but I think we can run over. I'll ask one last question and then I can open it up to the audience for sure. I've gotten a ton of great advice from you guys in this last 30 minutes, but I'd love to hear like what's the best piece of advice in college or post-grad?
And I thought it was like, I'll be honest. Like, you're 21, you're a 3-year-old adult. What I mean to say by that is maybe don't put a ton of pressure on yourself. One internship when you're 20 is not going to make or break your whole career. And if you think it will, you don't have enough experience. And so you are young in your career and you have plenty of opportunities to grow, learn.
One piece of advice that I try to remind myself of a lot is having a bias towards action, which just means basically like try to always be doing things, try to always be pursuing opportunities and doing things that are a little bit different from just like kind of the baseline status quo. Like if you have the option to go out to some weird event or some weird party that someone invites you to, or you can just stay inside and like watch Netflix on a given night, try to have a bias towards going out and going to that crazy party, because you never know what's going to happen. Maybe it'll be terrible, but if you stay inside and just watch Netflix, like you already know exactly what that is to, you know where that's going to get you. And so if you want to go somewhere else and you have to change up your route to go like try something new. So I think Paul Graham says action produces information, which just means if the more things you try, the more you're going to learn. And then based on what you learn, you can adjust and pivot and go somewhere else. So like the idea isn't that everything you do works out perfectly, but just that the things that you do are going to teach you something. And from there, you can like you're pretty much guaranteed to have an interest in life. Always trying to do interesting things. It might not be like great or everything's perfect. Like you might go through some lows, but it'll at least be interesting.
Has anyone read the new Elon Musk biography? Okay, so that's been like an obsession, my boss's obsession lately. And my boss's name is Chuck Norris, by the way. Yeah, he's a very interesting dude. But one thing we've been having conversations about related to Elon Musk happens in our internal innovation team. And one thing that Elon focuses on is that the only rules or laws that can't be broken are the laws of physics. Otherwise, everything else is fair game. And so we've been really trying to apply that thinking in terms of innovation at Nelnet and like, okay, well, this sucks and isn't working. Like, let's just go talk to someone and try to figure it out. Like, okay, yeah, this has been a rule for a long time, but like, who said that? Let's go talk to them. Let's change it. Let's make it work. So that's been really interesting.
Was not you guys much more insightful than I could ever be. Okay, I would love to open it up. Yeah.
Can you go in and tell us what's the process of the investor and founder relationship? What's the process?
Do you mean like how to best kind of create that relationship, or like what is the
Like the working
flow?
relationship, between like let's say I'm a founder and I want to work with Atland. What is the process in that relationship and in that business development?
What I would say, unless either one of you wants to jump in, is like it kind of starts with the, obviously you're a founder, you want to raise money or whatever, you will have to be connected with the investor. Often that's through your network, like someone that you know, although a number of funds like have just kind of an open contact form of some sort where you can say, hey, I'm looking to raise some money, so let me talk to you. And so then from there, I mean, obviously there's kind of some filtering, maybe the investor says, no, this company is very good, we're not gonna look at it. But if it is decent, then they'll take a meeting, you kind of give them a pitch. And if they like the company enough, I mean, we'll usually have to go through a process, but then we'll invest. And from there, I'd say it varies a lot, and different VC firms will do different levels of kind of like how strong the relationship is. And so again, at Atland, even we have some companies that we basically like invested in, then kind of never heard from again, or like they didn't really want to talk to us that much. And then some were like really close with, like better, we like go rock climbing. And so I think it's, I would say for each side, especially probably for the founder side, it's maybe a little bit more important. If you want something from the investor, like want some help, some advice, you really have to make an effort to kind of like go after that and ask for it. I mean, like they will also offer advice and help, but it's partly up to you to kind of develop that. And then from that, you can grow from there in terms of like building the relationship, talking about different things that you need and having it looks a little bit different.
And I would add that if you're in an area where you can go see the VC or the investors in person, please do. Even on the Zoom is still better than an email, phone call is better than email. If you can, try to build that relationship.
I'll quickly add that this is something I've been learning lately, and as deal flow picks up for the investor, it becomes much harder to keep track of everything and keep things moving along in the investment process. And so I find that founders that keep me honest and accountable by pinging me again and showing up in my inbox and being like, hey, haven't heard from you in a couple days, like, where are you at with this or something? That is so much appreciated. And anytime like a founder can help me make connections for them too. I just recently had a founder say, hey, I saw you're connected with this person and this person on LinkedIn. Would you mind making an introduction for me? Here's a short bio about me that you could easily share. So anytime like someone can help me, you know, make things happen quicker, I'm a huge fan of.
I'm gonna actually have some follow-up to that because I'm curious to ask that on the panel too to release, but obviously as young investors, like we don't have a ton of industry experience, not a huge network. I'm curious to hear how you guys kind of thought about having to fully release the fund.
So feedback is great. You really build a relationship and you want to help them with their pitch deck, but also you gotta be careful that you know, like, do you want some advice on your pitch deck? And you know.
Got like one.
Yeah. We have a ton of students. Background diversity thought. That's why it's nice to have people in it. So really just seeing what they need help with and then make communication as much as possible and staying in touch, even just being like, how are you doing as a founder? Are you stressed about anything? Or, you know, how's the rest of your life been? Are you planning on moving anytime soon and keeping up with some of those major life issues that do impact?
Honestly, I don't think I have a lot of great advice that I felt like I kind of struggled with the student. I think one thing to think about perhaps is how you can expand your like kind of your breadth of value that you can add. So like part of that would maybe go back to networking. Like as you expand your network, that's helpful for maybe like deal flow or something like that. But it's also helpful for the people that you can connect your founders, like companies that you've invested into, who you can connect them with, and how you can maybe develop more skills or expertise in other areas that you can like, give to the founder, I think is big. And that's something that maybe you don't have a ton of experience in early on, or that you don't really have the stuff there. You can go and get it if you're willing to do that, and if you think about what would be most helpful.
Every founder has different needs, and sometimes all they need is a check, you know, like, and we recognize that as students, and of course, we can be helpful from that student perspective. If someone needed connections or relationships with the university, that was great. But sometimes you just need 25K and a email introduction to another investor in Nebraska, and we were like, great, we got you, we can do that. So it can be as easy as that too.
Any other questions from the audience?
Hi, my name is Sid. I go to McAllister College and I study economics and biology. I know nothing about venture capital until I went here, so I'm so happy at what I did. I thought investment banking was the coolest thing ever. And I wanted to but now after this, I wanna get into this. I think what you do at Atland is very amazing. I think it would be cool if we could have something similar at McAllister. I wanna maybe start something like that at McAllister, but I don't know where to start. Do you have any advice on like someone like us who have zero experience in starting a venture fund led by students?
You need an advisor. And John is left.
Cool.
Students went to him, he's also a professor, and they knew he had the experience, and they said, this is what we want to do. They came with a plan, truly almost a business plan, and said, what do you think? Can you help us out? And if that's the first person you go to isn't the right person, keep looking. But you definitely need an advisor, and you have to kind of work with the administration a little bit.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
you're very-
No,
No.
that's all true. Like I'm sitting over here like, yeah. You can't do it by yourself. You need a team. So just go out and have conversations with people who've already done it. I had conversations with Atland. I had conversations with other student funds that were doing it, learned all the different ways that I could do it, talked to the university and got advocates from the university to be on my team. I got students that would be advocates for me. And so really building a community around your idea is gonna take you far. And it doesn't matter what you do know or you don't know. It's like, so, yeah.
The one other thing I might add to that is think of how you can create kind of an MVP for the end result. Like maybe you're not going to create like this fund right away, how you can do something that's a little step up. So I believe one of the things that Atland first did when it was getting started is before we really had a fund, we worked with Gopher Angels, which is an angel investment group in the Twin Cities. And we would offer to do diligence for them. Like when they were looking at a company, they would send us the company and some of the information. And then like the initial like Atland students would do diligence and go to them with things that present to it. And that's very similar to the diligence process that we now use today for our own fund. It was just doing it for someone else. And now it's a good way to get our foot in the door and do something that's pretty close to what you'd be doing eventually. It's one step of it, but it's a little bit lower cost here to start.
You got it.
Easy, right?
You guys have a lot of wondering what you
Question.
Biggest one being 20, and you guys might relate to this, is the imposter syndrome. That's something that always comes back, especially in this industry when you're working with 55-year-olds who've been doing this for decades and are really good at it, seeing thousands of companies. It's like constantly not feeling good enough. So I guess the future advice is always like the affirmations and stuff like that, and just like reminding yourself of what experience you do have and finding or creating ways for yourself to be valuable and getting yourself to see different people. It's a constant battle, but that's an excellent question.
Yeah, I would tell my future self, I think to be grateful for everything that happened is a big one. Like just, I mean, after everything that you've done, like enjoy it. Make sure it's a good time while it happened. As well as think about, like, make sure you're still lining up things that you don't want to let go wrong in your life. So I think that's something to think about. Like oftentimes we talk about our goals in life, but I think an idea I've heard recently is this idea of anti-goals, which are the things that you don't want to happen along the way to your goals. So like a common one is maybe someone says, I want to be really successful and make a ton of money, but along the way they neglect their family and their relationships, and like their kids don't know their parent because they spend all their time at work. So think about like, what are the things that I want to make sure I'm not doing throughout like my many years, to make sure you're still aligned on those and you don't get lost in all of the initial like goal chasing that keeps you ambitious.
There's a quote that my childhood friend had. Be interesting, be interested. And I want not only to be interested in a lot of stuff, but to actually try it. And this is kind of outside of work, but like, I want to learn how to play the drums. And I hope in 10 years I can play one song with drums. I hope I can publish a book, and I really like to do that. So things outside of work that I'm interested in, and truly being able to do that, in addition to work, and hopefully I learn personal skills that help me within the work.
The best investors and founders are the people that have like the weird hobbies and the cool stories.
Yeah.
And
What's like the thing that you built at university? Because I can imagine you put so much time into that, and it probably was bittersweet, but also like, what is your role there now?
yeah, it was sad, but also like we spent a lot of time trying to think through how can this live on, even though there's high turnover every year of students coming and going. So I felt confident that we like put the right things in place. And then it was actually easier than I thought it would be to lead. I trusted the people who became the new leaders of it, and they killed it. And the leaders after that killed it too. And so I just have a lot of faith in the students, and I've seen what students can do. So I was like, you guys got it. But that's
About time. Thank you guys again so much. I personally learned a ton. I feel 10 times more inspired today. Thank you guys.